Yeah. Hello. I can't see or think after that last slide, which was pretty smart. So I thought I had 6 minutes. We've actually got 10. So me and John have been frantically writing more slides, which I'm going to try and do through the medium of dance as I talk here. So I might end up finishing before time. Let's see, or I might just wang on forever. Who knows? I thought I'd better start by saying there's lots of kinds of insights, aren't there? Especially kind of the world we live nowadays. There's kind of you hear about people saying things like the kind of things that come out of Systemos are insights. Like 73% of people are talking about our brand, and I don't really want to talk about that because that's not really an insight, is it? I want to talk about the kind that takes this shape. And I thought I was cheating. Well, obviously I made this one up, sort of, although it's kind of like it's kind of synthesised from other things that I've heard. I thought I was cheating, and then somebody showed me a presentation that they'd been sent from another agency, thankfully not Dare, and it wasn't as good as this one. It said something like it was an insight around women, and it was something like I want to be a good mum, which made me relatively confident in showing this as a kind of sort of a template for kind of what insights can be when they're bad. So it's those kinds of insights that I want to talk about, and what I think somebody's calling me. It's probably the people who wrote that slide. That's my boss. Fuck, sorry, I felt like Bono answering the phone to the Pope. So, not that my boss is a Pope. I think that's almost as ugly as the slides. I told you I'd use Comic Sans. Comic Sans, it can work in the right context. So I think insights are horrible when they take that form. And there's a number of reasons why I think that. And I'll talk about some of them now. So the first reason is that they don't allow, the way that we use them, I don't think allows complexity. And I think complexity is really important in understanding people. This is, who watches Game of Thrones? So I would have thought more people in a planning audience would watch Game of Thrones. I'm frankly astonished. But anyway, he's my favourite character. And the reason I think he's brilliant, like so many great characters, is because he's really complicated. It takes quite a lot of things to understand this guy. And there's a number of things you could say if you're kind of writing insights about him. You might say, I crave the respect my father has never given me. Or you might say, I believe that intelligence and diplomacy are better weapons than physical power. Or you might say, I really love shagging, which is another one of the things that he likes to do. But none of those things really grasp the full man. He's interesting because he's complex, and therefore you kind of need to understand all of those things about him in order to if you're going to try and influence this guy. Let's say if you're a courtier, I'm really disappearing quite deep into the rabbit hole of Game of Thrones now. You'd need to kind of understand all those things to kind of understand him. So I think the way that we use insights in that kind of classical format doesn't really allow for that kind of complexity. The second thing is that they don't allow for change, really. Certainly the way that we use them doesn't allow for change. Does anybody know who this is, by the way? It's Macaulay Culkin. Yeah, I am. You never see us two of us together, do you? So maybe I am Macaulay. I'm not Macaulay Culkin. Wearing Julie Bobbers. This is not obviously when he was doing the Home Alone films. This is sometime later in his life. But there's something about the insight. You're supposed to kind of subscribe to it and agree to it and get it signed off by loads of people. And then if you deviate from it within that kind of year or the next year, you're not really allowed to do that, are you? And people kind of hit you with big sticks and say, stop it, that's not the insight. But the fact is people change. And I don't even really just mean over life stages. They actually change in really, products these days are more complicated, purchase cycles are more complicated, we're buying more and more services. I think insights change even over the purchase of a single product. The way that you feel and the things that explain your behaviour when you're at the beginning of, say, buying a car, when you're excited but massively underinformed, are completely different from when you're standing in the dealership about to hand over £30,000, very well informed but slightly frightened. I think there's not the same insight at work there. People are behaving for different reasons. So I think that's another problem with insights. Another problem still is that we kind of use them in this really annoying way, I think. We use them really literally, because once we've got one, we kind of think, oh, that's really great, let's stick it in an ad. And that's a really bad thing to do as well, I think. It's like, you wouldn't do this with a person, would you? Like, you wouldn't sit down and go, I know you really, really well, let's be friends. But that's kind of what we're doing, I think, or we try and stick insights into advertising. At the end, you end up doing advertising by analogy. It's one model of advertising, but it's kind of a boring one. So I think the other problem with them is that we use them too literally. There are other problems too. I think this is something that Andy alluded to as well. There's a certain form that they take. We end up obsessing over that. I don't know how many of you have been in these kind of interminable meetings that happen when you're trying to agree an insight and you get to the final stages, and there's a big argument about whether it should be I believe or I want, and whether it's too long or not, and that's just fucking pointless. It doesn't matter. And it has to fit in that little box on the brand thing, and that's kind of really annoying as well. And I think that gets in the way and makes them unhelpful. So that's another thing we do about insights that I don't like. There's only two more, and I'll stop ranting and I'll talk about something better, I promise. So does anybody know who this is? More recognisable than Macaulay Culkin, surely. It's Byron Sharp. We should all stand, really, for Byron Sharp. So one of the things about insights, again, I think, is that because we like the revelatory quality that the ones that feel good have, is that they tend to mean that we favour the new over the right. And actually, there's nothing necessarily, this is probably the most heretical thing I'll say in my entire talk, there's nothing necessarily that great about new. If you subscribe to the point of view coming out of people like his institute and some of the kind of recent stuff that's been written empirically about how advertising works and how brands work, it often isn't about being new or unique, actually. It's about selling a generic benefit in a really, really superficially interesting way, quite often. But if you're looking for the new, if you're starting from the point of view of thinking that new is right and that it's only going to work if we find something new, you aren't going to get there. So that's a problem, I think. And in fact, it kind of explains why this kind of second thing, really. So this is the ad that I was probably most jealous of last year, which is the fantastic Channel 4 work for the Paralympics. And I don't know what their insight was. It was probably something like, I don't feel like I could do what those guys do, or the Paralympians deserve to be celebrated as heroes or something. But I think the point is that this insight is, broadly speaking, the same one that Sainsbury's had. Sainsbury's being a client of ours, actually, behind their stuff, which was Hirst of Extraordinary. That was their. So they were the first Tier 1 sponsor of the Paralympics, and it did very well for them, and it was a really successful sponsorship and increased sales massively. But I think this is the work that took the biscuit. I think this work is fantastic. I suppose the point I'm trying to make is it has the same insight as the Sainsbury's stuff. But I don't think that's a problem, because I think this stuff is completely different, and B, brilliant. And if these guys were worried about the idea that insights need to be unique, and they got wind of the Sainsbury's stuff earlier on, they would have killed this, and that would have been wrong. It doesn't matter that they had the same insight. The point is they took it somewhere different creatively, and that's something I think we need to remember as planners. We can overstate the role of the stuff that we do. Finally, and this is I think the biggest problem with insights, there's sort of an arrogance in insights, I think, which is that if you can describe somebody's life in an interesting way, that sort of gives you the right to insert yourself into it. No, it doesn't. I don't think people need. Just because you can describe somebody accurately in an interesting way, or even a thought-provoking way, I don't think that gives the brand the right to have a role in their lives, actually. And I think that's what we really need to remember as brands, because quite often we aren't needed. Quite often we're a marginally better option that somebody has at best. That's kind of when we're successful. But we very, very seldom are needed, or at least needed in the ways that we can con ourselves into thinking we are. So I guess those are some problems that I think we have with insights. And I think what's happening really is that we've become slaves to a form, and we've kind of forgotten why we had them in the first place. There's nothing wrong with the desire to have insights. They're great, because the idea is that they help us make things that are more brands, communications, other things that are more relevant. But I think we've kind of forgotten that. And I think, so I did this stealing from the world of technology. I did it last time I did this. Tracy had a go at me standing on this stage, so she's probably going to do it again. It can happen again, why not? The definition of insanity is etc. But I think actually a much better model for thinking about this stuff comes from the world of websites, actually, and it's the idea of user needs. I kind of hate the word user much as I hate the word consumer, so let's just change it and call it needs. But I think needs are a much more useful thing to have in your head when you're trying to think about descriptions of consumers that leads to a kind of useful, interesting kind of work of whatever kind. And there's a few reasons for that. The first is probably the most obvious, which is that where insights don't, needs solutions. You can't frame a need without then saying, and therefore the solution could be this. And that's true. I think some of the best, most insightful work, I think of a brand like Dove, where I think, yes, they had a very, very strong insight, but I think they also cracked a need, which was that the women that are kind of being told daily by the beauty industry that they're ugly, that they're not up to scratch, kind of need to hear that actually they're okay and they're kind of all right. So I think a lot of the most insightful work actually kind of operates on the basis of a need anyway. And then some of the more interesting ideas like Twelfth Force really, really come out of a need. That's not, I don't know if you're familiar with that, it's the Best Buy idea, whereby the employees at Best Buy help people that have bought technology on Twitter, effectively. So that's because they realised that people had just bought all this new interesting technology and they were excited about it, but they needed help using it. So that wouldn't have come out of anything other than a need. Other thing about needs is that they aren't always new. So I don't know if anybody's seen Social Network, but one of the great things in it is when there's a couple of, it's kind of imagined obviously, and most of it's made up, but there's a scene in which they're kind of describing the need, the big insight behind Facebook, which is basically that girls like to get with guys who've been to Harvard, which is kind of horrible, but kind of not particularly a new need. And even if you don't buy that, and even if you just think actually it's just that people want to connect with each other, people want to connect with their friends, it's not fundamentally answering a new need or a need that people didn't realise. What it's doing is it's answering it in a new way. The technology's new, the need really isn't. And I think that doesn't matter because Facebook's massive and Mark Zuckerberg's very rich. The other thing about needs, and if anybody's kind of working more in the kind of web field, you'll know this, it's okay to establish multiple needs. That's perfectly fine. In the world of insights, that's less okay. He's George Carvin, I think, or I can't remember what his name is. It's just a really good photo. But he's trying to make a point about simplicity here. If you were trying to find an insight, this would still be not allowed because there's still too many things in it. Because there's stuff about getting up, stuff about going to work, stuff about eating 3 meals. There's too many things in it. That's too complex for most insights. But actually, it's a massively oversimple reduction of life. So I think we have to recognise, that kind of needs can be multiple. And if you're thinking about user needs, that's okay. In the world of web, that's okay because you think about different people, you think about the different needs they have at different points of the journey. That's perfectly okay there, but it's not okay in the world of insights classically. Had to get a royal photo in there, really, because obviously I'm a massive royalist. Not really. But the other thing about needs is that they can, I think we're kind of okay with the idea that they can change, so people's needs change over time. And again, not just in life stage, but also over a purchase. So I talked about the kind of cars analogy. Mortgages would be another one. Where kind of people who kind of are at the very beginning of kind of thinking about buying a house are, again, they're excited. They're thinking about lifestyle changes. They're thinking about moving in with somebody maybe. That's really different from when you're sitting in front of the broker, and it's different again when you're kind of 2 years into your mortgage and you're kind of thinking, shit, I'm spending a lot of money on this mortgage. Can I kind of get a new one? So the needs that people have change a lot, and that's okay, I think, if you take this kind of point of view. Whereas it's not kind of okay in the classical world of insights. So what I think we should do is forget about insights, or at least that word, because it's really not helpful and it comes with a lot of baggage, and instead think about this stuff. And I suppose I'd probably allow that the really, really good insights probably have a need in them already, but I think it's much more helpful just to cut this word out altogether and think about this thing instead. Thanks.